All right, let's get going. Thanks for being here, everybody. Brandon, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead. Yeah. Just unmuting for a moment. Sorry.
Okay. I just want to thank you all for being here to join us for this incredible opportunity to hear from documentary photographer Jonah Markowitz, his work focuses on the power of character-driven narratives, highlighting the overlapping nature of race, gender, and class disparities. In his work, he emphasizes dignity and humanity, which you'll see for sure, avoiding tropes of victimhood that plague much of the US media, which is something that I've written extensively about in this new book that I published with Tara Pixley recently. It's interesting, Jonah, because I saw that in your work years ago when we were collaborating at Viewfind, and I just really appreciate you kind of carrying it forward. Um, he works extensively in New York City, which is his hometown, investigating how intersectional inequality has shaped New York City in the 21st century. His work has been widely published, including by the New York Times, the Washington Post, Al Jazeera America, Newsday, the Chronicle of Higher Education, among others. And his work is included in the permanent collection of the Museum of the City of New York. Jonah himself describes himself as a New York City born and raised Jew who loves all things pork. This talk is being brought to us by the student organization called the ASFC in honor of Jewish Heritage Month. Every month we have a different heritage or history that we celebrate. Next month it will be Black History Month. And thankfully, we are brought the sponsorship from this group to be able to pay a very small stipend to a photographer who can provide a talk for us. So, without further ado, Jonah, thank you for being here. And what I thought we would do, everybody, is he would talk for 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, and then we could have some questions and answers. Is that good with you, Jonah?
Sure. I mean, I'm generally in pretty informal guy,
Okay.
so if you want to interrupt me with questions, be my guest. I'm going to run through a bunch of different projects we can figure out. I think I'll just pause momentarily between the projects to see if anybody has questions about that specific thing, so that I don't have to flip all the way back through to look at specific images or because I got a bunch of images, and so if people have questions about the first one, it'll take a while to get back. So I figure we'll stop after each thing, and if people raise their hands or whatever, Judy, are you going to call on folks
Sure.
or
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, or put or put some questions in the chat or something, and Judy can read them out, some version of that, whatever works for folks.
Abs-
Um, so yeah, thank you for that intro. I appreciate it. I'll show three different pieces that I've worked on in New York City uh, throughout the last few years. They're from 22 to present day. Um, and since it is Jewish Heritage Month, I figured we'd start talking about a big story I did that on the New York City yeshivas. For people that don't know, yeshiva is a Jewish school. These are the ultra Orthodox, specifically Jewish schools in New York City. And I figured I'd show the way that it ran in print first. Actually, this is a collection of stories. It was a big reporting project. A couple hundred people talked to, and so it didn't all come out in the same story. So this is when the first story ran, but then there was a bunch of sort of follow-up stories and related coverage. So on the left-hand side, you see the front page of the New York Times. Proud to be A1 above the fold on this particular story. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see inside the A section. And so it's a double truck. So where the fold would be is in the gap. You can see it on the bottom of the column down there. And it sort of ran through a little bit of the picture. But that New York Times thankfully treats images super well. They have great designers. And so they came up with this great design, which I won't take any credit for. But anyway, so basically the story is about these yeshivas. And um, in New York State, we have this law which says that all private schools and religious schools need to teach up to the standard of New York City public schools. And basically, the investigation found that these yeshivas were not teaching secular studies up to the same standard as New York City public schools. So they were severely lacking in science and math and English and history, basically all of the, what we would consider to be tenets of sort of pillars of education. Instead, they were focusing intensely on religious education and learning, basically how to raise good ultra-Orthodox Jewish members of the community. And that's sort of a fundamental difference in how the leaders of the community saw the role of education. And to be fair, these communities live with tons of rules, sort of arcane rules that govern everything from how you get up, how you wash your hands in the morning, what order you do, like almost everything. And so there are a lot of things to learn, but New York State's point was you still have to obey by the laws. And so this was a project that mixed some portraiture in with sort of general photographs of the areas and outside the schools. And this portrait in particular was a kid named Joseph Krause, who left one of these ultra-Orthodox Hasidic communities in upstate New York. And he left and had no idea how to move in the modern world. His English was poor. He couldn't read or write. Math was terrible. Didn't know how to use smartphones or the internet. And so he was one of the main sources for the article. So me and the reporter, one of the two reporters, Eliza Shapiro, went up to Liberty, New York, where he was staying in this Knights Inn, which Dubs is a homeless shelter. And during our portrait session, which we went sort of all over, not just here, at one point we were standing on Main Street, and I was like, well, this, I looked up at the streets and I was like, well, this is Main and 15th or whatever the street was. And he was like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? And I was like, what do you mean? What do I mean? It's the streets. And he's like, what are you talking about? And so he didn't understand how street signs worked or how to read them, or that's the level of insularity in these communities.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, so we're not talking about sort of like they're just off the curve. No, we're talking about significantly hampered ability to move in the modern world. And part of that is by design, because they want to keep folks in the communities. And also, and part of it is that they want to teach folks how to be good pillars of a Jewish community. And then what they need to learn about the outside world will come sort of ad hoc based on, a job later. It's the role of the jobs to teach them sort of the math that they'll need to use in the job, or the reading, or the use of the internet, or all that kind of stuff. There isn't sort of like hey, this is a blanket level of education that everybody should have. And this is Alana Siegel. She was a longtime New York education official and former chief policy officer for special education. So one of the follow-ups for this piece was looking at how special education was being billed, essentially, and like overbilled and overused in these communities as a way to bring money in to subsidize the yeshiva education, which is technically private religious education. But because the families truthfully don't make very much money, they need to they use whatever loopholes they can to fund the schools, right? So that was part of the investigation, was looking at how they were getting federal funding for busing, for example. All these schools, they're like the only schools in New York City proper that use that use a ton of school busing. Every single one of them uses a ton of busing. And part of the reason is because they can apply and receive all this federal money and then presumably use part of it for the busing, but then they use it to subsidize the tuition essentially. And they were getting to the tune of $500 million from state and federal funds a year to help them run these schools. One of the things they were getting money for is like sort of computer systems, and of course these kids have no access to computer systems. This is Jacob Fishman. He was one of the sources for the article, and he was a former student. Here are the famous buses. They really are. And I live in Brooklyn in Crown Heights, and the funny thing, the picture that ran on A1 of the bus and the kids looking out is a school that's like a block and a half from my house. I pass it twice a day walking my dog. It just happened that one day I shot an A1 picture. It's there. And so here's this is obviously not New York City. These are some of the communities that in upstate New York. There's another one. I would go back, but there's another one. They're sort of famous for this style housing where they'll have they'll do these small sort of apartment buildings, but there's so many families and so many kids that live in every single one. And they leave their toys around. It's kind of they don't need to worry about crime. They've made completely their own community there. And their opinion is, we teach our kids how we want, but out. We have no crime. We have no drug use. We don't take resources in that way. So let us be, essentially. Over the course of doing the visual reporting, which was, I don't know, the better part of a year, but very off and on, it's not full time. I developed some of my own sources in the community, and they told me about this huge gathering of Satmar men and boys in Brooklyn. They put up this huge hangar for the affair where the Grand Rabbi addresses the crowd. And so this was one of the later pictures I took, but this was the way that I was able to inject my own reporting into the visual reporting into the pieces.
Jonah, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
How did you get access?
Well, to this is, I mean, over time, I essentially just built up a little bit of a rapport with a couple of folks in in the cities in upstate New York. Generally, I had no access. So almost everything you're looking at is what I can shoot in the street. Like the New York Times didn't give me any access. They told me to take portraits of folks, but they gave me no access to things because they weren't giving the New York Times any access.
Right.
So originally the story started with essentially a list of a bunch of what we call building mugs, which is go to an address and make an interesting picture of this building, which is like the bane of every photojournalist's existence. And essentially this project was like 15 building mugs and then 15 portraits. And so I had to sort of stay long enough and put up with all of the things that came with staying long enough, which is generally people being unhappy, generally them calling their specialized police. They're not real police, but they're their police. And their police would come and harass me and tell me to leave. And I'd tell them, no, this is my right. And sorry, you live in this nation which we have a right to photograph in public space, and you can't pick and choose the religious freedoms, for example, which you love, and not have the civil liberties stuff like being able to photograph in public. So some of the stuff was built on access, but some of the stuff was not. I mean, this stuff like this was outside. This is outside in my neighborhood.
Okay.
This is a meeting of the school board in this one. This is like all the school board members in this one community in upstate where they've completely taken over the school board.
So that's a public meeting.
This is a public meeting where where we're allowed to photograph and record. Yeah. But almost everything is outside. This is outside a school in Borough Park, Brooklyn. This is another this was a big, this was like the Grand Rabbi's, I don't, niece was getting married in Kiryas Joel, which is one of the cities the little towns I was doing a lot of reporting in. This is just what's happening outside the big synagogue as they're getting married. Um, so yeah, it's almost all outside, and that's the trick. The trick is to like you make it look like I had access. That's when you know you're doing your job well.
Mhm.
Um, so this is a portrait of Menachem Fox, and Fox is a child psychologist who had done a bunch of sort of referrals and things for the ultra Orthodox community. Um, Part of the interesting fact is that basically, if you're going to these yeshivas, you're not going to be going to medical school because you don't get the kind of grounding, educational grounding that you would need to be able to get in to a college and then into a medical school. So they rely essentially on varying levels of religious Jewish folks to help sort of diagnose and refer and do these things that help their special ed system continue going. So that's why. So Menachem Fox, I remember he was like someone who would evaluate students for special ed services, and that I remember he strongly supported the community, but he's in recent years gotten a little concerned with the practices around billing for special ed and things. Um,
Jonah, is it okay to interrupt with a question?
Totally.
Uh, There was a photo that you showed about three back that was a number of men crowded together outside, and it's really striking. I mean, all your photos are very striking. Yes, that one.
Mhm.
Um, I wondered if I could ask you about a little bit about what that picture shows, and I'm really curious. I'm very new to photography. When you're in a scene like this, could you talk for a second about what goes through your mind and how you knew to take that shot, or were you taking a whole lot of shots and later realized you had a great one here, or how did that work? How did that come together?
So this is the same. Sorry, also when I look this way, it's because I've got the presenter mode on this screen, can't see, and then I have people's faces on this side. So I'm actually looking at you when I'm looking that way. I'm not, I'm not distracted. So I just
Sure.
wanted to say, so okay, this scene is the same scene as uh this scene, right? which is which and the scene generally is this is the Lubavitch sect of ultra Orthodox Jews native to Crown Heights, native since post World War II to Crown Heights, and they are among the only sort of like outward looking ultra Orthodox sect. They have, if you've ever seen like a Chabad, they call them Chabad centers all over the world, Chabad. They are not exactly proselytizing, but trying to get Jews to be more religious and more in touch with this sect of Judaism. So it's like as close to proselytizing as Jews get. Um, Now they have these Chabad centers all over the world. Once a year, they bring rabbis from all of these Chabad centers back to the world headquarters, which is in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, 770 Eastern Parkway. Also happens to be a block away from my house. Um, and they set up these massive bleachers because they take a yearly photo. And so this is actually a photo op. Um, and I wasn't really interested very much in the photo op as much as I was interested in getting this sort of amazing like group of folks in there. And so basically, as I'm going through this scene, I'm trying to figure out, okay, I know what the photo op looks like because I did some research. I looked at what they were trying to get, what they try to get. They try to get a super wide thing that shows like, look how many people we have. And I wanted, first of all, little moments that spoke a little bit more, sort of that made for sort of that can make for pictures that kind of stare back at you and are interesting in that way and not sort of what they were going for. So with this picture, this one I like the breakup. I took a bunch of variations, right? The sea of faces is interesting. I took those frames. I like the breakup here. I love the hand of this guy clutching the tree, the color of the tree, the striking sort of difference. The million faces are of course interesting, and then the centered guy looking off into the sky was, like spoke to something outside of what's being photographed. And then the other one that you talked about specifically, this one is a product of me watching this poor guy. Just wanted to sit down, but there's so many. I think it was his sons to the left and right. There's so many people there, and there's like people trying to get everywhere, and that without noticing, they were like totally crowding him. And this is a moment where he was trying to make sure that his hat stayed on, because he was getting jostled around. And so, I think it speaks to like the individual in the individual in a sea of folks, but this individual that in a community that requires conformity to some degrees, and then how do you how do you maintain your own life and your own individualism in this space? And it's just like, the push and pull of that and the tension of that moment, I thought was worked well. So basically, to answer your question succinctly, I look at a big scene, and then I try to find little pieces in that scene, and then I try to build those little pieces into a thing that makes a picture that holds up for more than 5 seconds.
That was
This
great,
was,
Jonah. That was really excellent. Excellent breakdown.
Yeah,
thanks.
thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so these are just the last few images. This one gives you a good idea of what the space looks like for Curious Joel. That's this city where I did a lot of reporting. And then a little final portrait from that area. All right, so I don't know how we're doing on time. I should probably
We're
move on.
good. We're good. You just roll. This is great.
Okay. All right, so this is a piece that I was working on that I had pitched in, I don't know, in 21 or something, and I'd been working on it sort of on my own while doing a lot of that yeshiva reporting. And this project was all about a Bangladeshi community in Brooklyn, in Kensington, Brooklyn. So this is the cover of the metropolitan section of the New York Times. What you're seeing is the cover laid flat. The part on the right-hand side is the cover of the section. The part on the left-hand side wraps around and is the back. And then when you open it up, it's one huge picture. So for this project, I did a fair amount. I did both video and photo. My hope is that this stuff plays through. It's going to play a little stuttery for right now, but it's super, super, super high speed camera called the Phantom, shooting at about 1,000 frames a second. So these moments in real life are split-second things that are then elongated into these scenes that drew attention to little details within life there, because the place can be you're sort of striking in how the sounds and smells and number of people and all those things. And we use this video to try to bring out little details. So here's the photo that ran on the front page of the Metro section. But basically, it's sort of a deep examination into a community in Brooklyn that never receives much fanfare, but sort of toiling away, making the American dream happen in Brooklyn. And yeah, it took a long time to get. I went there. I grew up not that far away from this place. I've been going there for a while. I was interested in telling a story here and didn't sort of understand what the story was going to be about ultimately until I'd spent a really long time working there. And so ultimately it just became a document of this neighborhood in this particular time and of these people. And it didn't need to be more than that. Didn't need a hard news peg. It was just sort of recognizing the community for what it is. And so I spent the better part of 2 years working in this intersection. This is the heart of the community here. This is you can see up there. It's called Little Bangladesh, but it's McDonald Ave and Church Avenue. This community started with a few sort of laborer Bangladeshi men in the 1970s, and then grew outside of that. So it came the sort of the foundation for the American dream was always construction work for these folks. Um, and so a big part of that was the construction work, but that's also changing over time. So this is one of the characters in the project. This is Mir Hussein, who's an iron worker. He started doing iron work at the age of 12 in Bangladesh, working on buses and welding buses, and then came over and sort of took his trade and ran with it, and is yes doing iron work. He's bought him. I met him a couple of years after he had been here, but he bought an F-150 and now does a lot of iron work in this neighborhood. And then a funny story, I ran into him on my block in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, not that long ago, because he had been hired to come do iron work on the block. And so now he's moving beyond this community. But really this community is sort of the stepping stone for people who are coming into the US from Bangladesh. And this is the first place that they'll come into JFK, they'll get rides, and they'll start here. And because there's plenty of people who can offer services and housing and all the things without needing to speak English, and maybe, some of the stuff will be on loan and things. So, this is like their first place to sort of figure it out. Yeah. So this is Shahana Hanif. Shahana Hanif is city councilwoman. This is like showing sort of the upward mobility of the American dream. She was born here to Bangladeshi parents. And yeah, this is sort of like representing a little bit start of sort of the real participation in democratic government here. Okay. So this is Motul. A significant portion of the population there doesn't have papers, it's undocumented. And so Motul is undocumented, so we never showed his face. We called him, he went by Motul in the piece. He's a laborer. I think he was 53 at the time. He's doing day labor, construction work, and that represents sort of the old pathway of upward mobility. And since the pandemic, there's been a big shift, and the big shift is into delivery driving. And so a lot of the folks who would have gone into the construction business have decided not to do that, and it's a little bit more. They feel like they're a little bit more in the of the times when they're doing delivery work, because it's like app based and they get to choose when they work. They don't have to get up at 4 a.m. to go do manual labor. They get to ride these scooters and control their own work, and so it feels a little bit better to them. So now there's a significant number of folks who are doing delivery work instead of construction work. One of them, but it's not without peril. This is a funeral for one of the delivery drivers of the neighborhood. There's a number of folks, still a relatively dangerous profession, zooming around the streets. I think this person died as a result of a robbery in Manhattan for his e-bike. This is another character. His name is Rubel Uddin. His brother Tariq Aziz died while doing delivery work. He slipped off his bike. He hit a sand patch trying to make a turn, slipped off his bike, hit his head, and died later in the hospital. And so I followed Rubel as he was sort of dealing with the death of his brother. and also balancing that out with doing delivery work himself. He refuses to go on the e-bikes, though. He drives around and does it by car. Farojan Saeed, one of the folks who lives right by that main intersection with her husband and her husband's family. She's a dance instructor, and she brought like this sort of beautiful world of celebratory dance, where we brought us into that space. And this is her with her mentor, Annie.
I just love these little video vignettes. I just love them. It's
Yeah,
with
they
a
break
phantom.
Phantom, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a
It
little bit of
reminds me of
a
cinemagraphs, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm like dating myself right now pretty seriously by saying that.
Well, I mean, they're a nice transition in a mostly stills piece, because
Hmm.
I feel like sometimes it's hard, it's a little jarring when you go from full motion video to stills and back again. They can be
Right.
a little hard, but these are somewhere, it really lives somewhere in between. Um, and so I thought they worked well for this.
I had wanted to ask you also. I mean, the videos are beautiful, but so many of your stills are beautiful. What made you decide to do some of that video, and how do you think about which you do video and which to do still photos of?
Yeah, I mean, there are so I part of my job, I am a filmmaker too. You'll see more of that work in the next project. But I grew working on documentary sets, and then camera department in documentaries, and then into directing my own doc work at the same time while doing photojournalism. Um, and so the I mean, there's certain things that just work better for video, right? If it's like moving scenes where you need to understand the movement, certain things like sound. I mean, this project didn't have sound, but the next one you'll see does have sound, hearing people's voices, hearing it directly from themselves, and then and so there's certain moments that just work better for video. This project, because it was such a stylized video, like it was a little bit clearer what all the video needed to have significant amounts of movement, whether that was I was introducing the movement through camera work or whether it was people moving through the frame. So it was kind of a clear delineation in this one, which stuff I was going to do. But I mean, I wanted the place to come alive a little bit more than just in the stills. And yeah, and I wanted to look at specific details that wouldn't end up piling up in a stills project necessarily. Depends how you shoot it. It's not my way of shooting to have a ton of, especially not at this time. I'm shooting more details now than I used to. But at this point, I wasn't shooting as many details, and I wanted details to be in there, but I also wanted them to be interesting. So I was like, well, let's stylize it and introduce the Phantom. And it can be a thing that's in between video and the still image. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yes, the last. It's interesting now that I'm looking at this. This one actually reminds me of that image from the yeshivas thing where the guy's looking up, right? It's like
Mhm.
kind of a similar frame.
Very brilliant eye for light.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you. All right. Um, all right, so this one's a little heavier. This is the most recent project I've done. A little trigger warning. There are definitely images that deal with death in here. Um, Nothing specifically graphic, but like it's definitely in the work because it needed to be. This is a project that I shot throughout 2025. It looks at the New York City subway system, specifically its operators and how they deal with the trauma of hitting people with their subways, their trains. Um, It was born out of conversations that I had with my photo editor at the New York Times on how um, a lot of these events get some sort of spotty local coverage, but very rarely is there something that looks deeper at what happens beyond the scenes, beyond the initial sort of tragic incident itself, and what happens to the people who are in the operating booth, because they're the last people to see these
Mm,
folks alive.
that,
Um,
get that. That
and
tell Brandon. So that's kind of what he was referring to. It's kind of just this snippet. This is amazing.
thank you. Um, yeah, so you know, 255 or so people got hit by trains in New York City in 2024.
Mm,
Not all of them were fatal. That's, I think, 100 and some odd of them were fatal, but it's not a particularly infrequent occurrence. But it only really gets reported when, like most of them, it's a combination of things. One is it's people commit suicide this way by jumping in front of a train as it's coming into the station. People are inebriated and fall into the tracks. People lose their phones and things, drop them into the tracks, and then try to go in and get them. There was an incident where a girl tried to go into the tracks to go pee recently. I think she was drunk. It was she tried to like go into the tunnel and to pee, and then the train was coming and she couldn't get back out. So occasionally they make the news, but what doesn't make the news is what the train operators go through after it happens, because it's a very intimate experience, unfortunately for them. Um, so this is so we fought. So it was a little bit of a larger investigation, which was great because it paired visuals with an investigation hook, which is not something that we always get as visual storytellers. We So basically, in order to get it to the investigation side, I reached out to 10 different subway operator, like transit agencies across the US. All the other biggest ones, figured out what they offer their workers. And then I talked to 5 different trauma specialists, figured out what they should be offering. And then we looked at and then we interviewed or spoke to at least 25 different train operators in New York and looked at what they actually do get. And what they do get is if it's a fatal incident, you get 3 days off of work and then you're expected back. Or if it's non-fatal, it's 1 day off of work and then you're expected back. So if you don't go, the only option for you is to circumvent that route is to fill out what's called an injury on duty form, and then you can go into the workers' compensation system to get mental health treatment. But the workers' compensation treatment, workers' compensation is meant for like, shoulder injuries, broken legs. It's like it was not made to treat mental health. And so basically the MTA, even though they pay into the workers' comp system, they don't control any of that. So the MTA like really doesn't do very much themselves for workers at all. And that's our point. So this is Edwin Gieti. He is a Honduran. His parents came from Honduras. He lives with his family in a rent controlled apartment in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. This is his grandmother, 93-year-old grandmother, Juanita, who he was helping care for while he was out. So he hit somebody with his train, saw them at the last possible moment, which is a common refrain, hit the emergency brakes, couldn't stop the train in time, and ran the person over. And he was out and trying to get care and taking care of his grandmother in the process. Was taking her to the doctors, to Methodist Hospital, because she was having seizures. And that's him getting her ready to go. So as a part of his treatment through the workers' comp system, he was going through exposure therapy. And this is a little mini film I made with him about the exposure therapy process. And if you can't hear it or something, let me know so that I can restart it. But we tested it, it should work.
As I take each step, it feels as if I'm going deeper, deeper into the ocean. I start to smell the brings universe. It's a distinctive smell that the train operators or employees would smell. The heart beating is faster and faster. And the more deeper I get into the station, it goes faster than that. Boom, 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 boom. Now at this point, the knees are starting to feel a little shaky, a little weak. The rumbling noise reminds me of me operating. And whenever I think about operating, those flashbacks triggers the moment of my incident. It's where I'm afraid to even go further and further. But as opposed to telling myself to turn back, I stop in place, breathe, close my eyes, and take baby steps to get further and further and further. Telling myself that this is not my fault. The incident is not your 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 fault.
That's great, Jonah. Really powerful.
Thanks. Yeah, so we had some flexibility in terms of how we told the story, and I felt like this is a good example of things that you couldn't do in a still. Like I did stills of his exposure therapy, and it just doesn't relate the same level of emotion, and it doesn't represent his experience nearly as well to do that in a still. So as a part of when you go through the workers' comp system and you're getting that treatment, one thing that they will do is they'll work on exposure therapy, which means that you'll go back to a train station generally, and you'll work your way up from going down the stairs at the train station to on a train, to riding in the front train, to riding in the front of the train in uniform, to riding on the in the front of the train on the line that you had your incident at the time that you had your incident. And that's sort of the final step in exposure therapy. So that was early in his exposure therapy where he was only going to he wasn't even going to the tracks yet. He was going only to the, to like before the turnstiles. Edwin is now back to work, and in the first trip that the MTA put him on when he came back, the very first trip he had to operate was the same line as when he had his incident on. So his first trip back was through the same station. So for this, I also did a number of just sort of like ambient photos in the subway stations and whoops. So this is Nyoka Baptiste. She is a new operator. She had only been on the job 13 months, and she had already had 2 of these incidents within the first year of being on the job. And she did not take the same amount of time that other folks have taken. She had to get right back to work because she had a daughter who was in college. She was on probation at the time. They were every day she had taken off for mental health reasons. They added to the end of her probation. She really wanted to get off probation because it's easier to get fired when you're on probation, and it feels like people are breathing down your neck when you're on probation. But also you miss a significant number of payments while you're waiting for workers' comp to kick in, and workers' comp may not be your whole check. So she went back to work right away.
I would be laying in bed, and at least for the first 2 weeks, I couldn't close my eyes because I kept seeing him. I kept seeing the blue shirt and the shorts. I would say he was probably like 5'4", blonde hair. He probably even had green eyes. That's how much we made eye contact. So when he jumped, he actually made the loudest thump sound. The impact was just so loud that you couldn't help but to say to yourself, I don't think he survived that. Literally, the first 3 days, I didn't actually sleep. Laying there and just having all these questions that I had no answers to. Why did this happen? Is this job for me? How long do I have to stay out? They say that you would get workers' comp. When will that kick in? You know, my daughter is going back to school. She's in college. So all these things were just weighing on me heavily, and then aside from my life questions, I would just keep seeing the sky.
Great audio. Great interviews.
Yeah, so it's Naoka. Um, this is her after working a long shift, having dinner with her daughter, the one that was in college. So Thomas Sellers was our last character. This is him doing exposure therapy on the same line where the incident happened. He's looking in this picture, he's looking out uh, on the track as he begins to pull into the station where he had his incident. Thomas Thomas was 23-year vet, was a couple years away from retirement when this happened, and so he went through exposure therapy. He got access to exposure therapy through the workers' comp system, but they didn't approve him for very long. He only got like a month or so. He only got a couple months, and he had a problem in the MTA didn't file his paperwork properly, and so as a result, he didn't get paid. He didn't get paid for 3 or 4 months while doing the exposure therapy. This is just all of these. It's no singular policy that makes it hard. It's all of these things that make it difficult for people to go out and seek treatment. Right? He's in a position where he'd been working for a long time. He had enough savings between him and his wife where they could afford it, but Naoka couldn't. Our last person couldn't afford to go a month or two without pay college tuition and all that stuff. So she had to go back to work. So here's Tom's film.
The first thing I did when I got home was go over to the church and ask to speak to a priest and tell him what happened and try and start the healing process spiritually and emotionally that way. The priest that I spoke to on Tuesday was saying a Wednesday mass at 9 a.m. for the school children attached to St. Margaret's Church. And he told the congregation to please pray for one of the parishioners who was going through a hard time. And then one of the children stood up and said, "Can we also pray for my mother's friend who was hit by a train last night?" So that to me is a divine connection, because there was only one person struck by a train Tuesday night in Queens. So it was tough. Still is. But I pray for that child every night, and I pray for forgiveness, and I hope that the guy that tried to commit suicide doesn't hold it against me. So I just have to forgive myself. I'm getting there.
Wow.
So that was, so the woman who was who was giving out the body of Christ there is his wife. This is his wife in the center of this frame. This is them at their son's graduation, high school graduation. Yeah, I couldn't believe the story he told me. What that there was this insane connection the following day between some parishioner, and he didn't know who the child was. He doesn't know who the child was. It was impossible for us to like corroborate that it was like the exact same thing, but it was the same incident. Um, but it was one of the hardest moments for him outside of the incident itself. So it felt like we needed to let him say it, at least in his own words.
Mhm.
And here's Tom on his first night back to work. Uh,
God, what a great portrait. Jeez.
yeah. Yeah, I struggled with how to shoot this for a long time, and I was like, okay, let me just try to go across the platform and like, see what I never shoot on a long lens really. If you notice, a lot of my work's like close and wide because I generally believe in being in the action. Uh, but I was like, let me just see what this looks like. And I was like, oh my God, look at the city, look at the city back there. You can
Is
see
it a 200, a 300?
the lens was a 100, 300. I don't
Oh,
know.
okay, zoom. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a zoom. I don't know what focal length that was that exactly, but somewhere in that
Mhm.
range. Yeah, the
Beautiful.
compression worked well on this.
Mhm.
Yeah, all right. So that's all I
Oh
got.
my gosh, I could just keep going. Amazing. Just amazing work. So sensitive. And it also really kind of shows the clear trajectory of the visual storyteller with stills into the filmmaker using audio and motion. You know, Brandon, I don't know if you're able to discern, but like with stills, obviously visual is the primary form of, what makes something powerful. But when you're dealing with video, it's the audio, right? So you could put the most amazing visuals behind the absolutely the worst audio and it will be awful. But you could put amazing audio underneath mediocre stills and it will still be great. So having that combination, Jonah, for me was very powerful to see that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I totally agree. The audio is the backbone, which is hard to admit as a person normally responsible for visual. No, but audio is tremendously important, and it's also often forgotten, especially for visual storytellers. It's like um, it's never been a strong suit. But I worked with my own editor on these videos, who I work with on a lot. Editor meaning video editor, not photo editor. So
Mhm.
not a person at the time. It was a person I have a working relationship with for a long time on my documentary work. And so we were able to build the scenes in a way that is more intentional than what is
Mhm.
you normally get out of like deadline video for New York Times.
And very documentary. It's not like you're setting anything up. Like
Oh no,
it feels
totally.
very intimate and very in the moment and not constructed and forced and like redone.
Yep, totally. I mean, we're doing
Brandon, do
great.
you have some more questions?
Just thank you for sharing. This is your work. I mean, your work is great, and it's really interesting to hear about how you approach this. I'm always curious about that. Um,
Mhm.
are
Brady,
you?
did you have any questions?
Yeah, I was curious about, I guess, like the timeline for one of these projects, because I'm sure they all kind of take a different amount of time, but like, what do you typically see as like when you start and end for like, I'm sure, it's a long time for gathering, whether it's like for investigating, gathering the investigative side of things, and then also gathering the photos. Like, are you doing the or, somebody doing the investigating prior to that, and then you're gathering all these photos afterwards, or was kind of just curious more about the process for it.
Great
Yeah, sure.
question, Brady.
Yeah, they're all three of them are a little bit different. The first one, The first one, the yeshivas in New York, is not a thing that I drove the investigation on. That was like the investigations team doing that work, and they brought me on sort of when they had a rough publication time frame, right? They were like a couple months out from publication, but they had already been working on that for, I think they worked on it for over a year. So they had been working on it for 6 months and doing that. And then the other two were both pitches, both my pitches where I was the lead reporter. And so I was doing all the investigation on the work. And so those I would be investigating, shooting, and finding characters and doing all that stuff all in the same time frame. And how long it takes, I don't know. Like the Kensington one, I think it was the Kensington was the little Bangladesh one. That one I worked on for over 2 years, but it's not a full-time thing, right? I'm always juggling like 3 or 4 different projects. So I think I went there, I don't know. You can only bill so many days. That doesn't really matter. You have to do like the work that you need to do to make the piece really great. So in terms of billable days, I don't know. They're probably like, I think Kensington was like 35 or something billable days, which is a ton, It's a dream. It also is not, doesn't cover the amount of time that I actually worked on it. I must have put, I don't know, 70 days of worth of like reporting and all the things in. But 35 days is like a dream come true in
A
this way.
dream for the New York Times. Are you kidding? Like, it's very rare. I just want to say that it's very rare that someone is able to pitch their story to the New York Times and then have them give them that much space. Very rare. Usually they reserve that for their staff photographers. So Jonah clearly, articulates that you're in a special spot there, I have to say.
I am. It took me a long time to get to this spot. I had my first picture published in the New York Times in 2012, and then I didn't work for them again for 7 years. Or for 6 or 7 years. And then I did 3 or 4 years of like real estate portraits and building mugs, and they weren't very good building mugs. And like, those sort of smaller assignments, which was fair because I needed to learn the ropes and do all the things. It's a part of the process. No one just goes from 0 to 60 at the time is doing this kind of work. So it took me, it took me 10 years of working on or off for them to get to the place where I made the Yeshivas project, for example.
Yeah, it's just great. Great work. I can't thank you enough for being here. And just as an aside, Brady and Brandon, Jonah's on getting his master's of fine art, and I think I would say you would be a great teacher. You would be a
Oh, thank you.
great addition to our profession as teaching this.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate that. That's
let me
definitely,
know how I can
yeah,
support that.
yeah, it's somewhere in the we can't work forever in this game. You sort of have a sweet spot of when you're making nice work, your work is in favor, your editors are working there, you have the right people in the right places. But there's tons of people who want to do this work. And so
Mhm.
I feel very lucky and very fortunate to have made it. And I sort of always pinch myself, like, sort of, am I going to realize it that I'm in the pinnacle when I'm in the pinnacle of making the
Yeah.
work? Just making the work. The life has many different pinnacles, but making the
Making
work
stuff.
wise, yeah, yeah. So I am getting my master's. Part of it is so that I can one day have what I need to teach accreditation wise, but it's also like sort of filling gaps artistry wise. The muscles, it's MFA, it's not in journalism. I chose not to go the journalism master's route. It's fine art route. And so um I'm trying to flex different muscles and stay uncomfortable because that's where the best work is made.
Well, I can't thank you enough again. And Brady and Brandon, thanks for being here. Dean Herman was here. I'm sure lots of people are going to get to watch the video. And I will be sure to share it with you as soon as I get the first part edited down and then edit it to the meat of our talk.
Sure.
Jonah, thank you again and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Yeah, if anybody, I'm easy to find. Jonah Markowitz. Reach out. Happy to chat.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, y'all. See you later.
Take care.
Thanks, Jonah.
Yeah. Bye, Judy.